Our third assignment in the CPC101 program here is the closed Grisaille master copy. The principles are very, very similar to what we did last assignment with the open Grisaille. We're basically taking a master work, still life, portrait, landscape, whatever, and trying to copy it in black and white. Now the difference, like we briefly mentioned with the open Grisaille assignment, was that open Grisaille has an open paint film. It's open enough to allow the white to show through, allowing you to have a whole range of light to dark. A closed Grisaille indicates that the paint film is closed. You're not showing any gaps in the canvas. And because of that, we need to use white paint. So now we're getting into white paint and black paint and trying to control our mixtures of light and dark to create a black and white version of the masterwork that we're looking at. So this will present a new set of challenges. We're going from using basically just a scumble from our brushstroke chart to using potentially the whole range of strokes from our brushstroke chart. And that's going to depend largely on which master copy you select. Now some artists use really smooth paint films where you can detect almost no brush strokes whatsoever. Some have really big splashy brush strokes, some have open gaps in their paint film, some have impasto. There's a huge range of possibilities out there. And the idea with this master copy is that we're going to learn, or try to learn, how an artist is applying paint to the canvas. So it's a slightly different focus. Last assignment you were just kind of getting acclimated to paint and the brushes and applying some basic scumbling to the canvas. Now we're trying to make actual paintings. We're trying to think in terms of layering, inspecting the painting copy we're looking at and deciding which colors went first, which colors came second, what's really thinly painted, what's really thickly painted. So there's a few things, key little pieces of clues that we'll be able to find on paintings, even images of paintings that we'll be able to see. That give us clues as to how we should be approaching this. So for example, on paintings with impasto, often because of the way a painting has to be lit to photograph it, you'll see a little bit of dark shadow on one side of the impasto stroke, and that indicates that it is a thicker stroke, and you'll need to layer more paint on. In contrast to, for example, a stroke where you see dark all the way around, which could just be a piece of cracked paint that dirt has worked its way into. So you'll see that on older paintings, for example, like the Mona Lisa. If you look really closely, it almost looks like little tiny paint chips there. It's not that Leonardo went really thick in impasto with it, it's just that the paint film has cracked over time and dirt has gotten into it. So the dark on the bottom side, for example, of a stroke might indicate a shadow and thus impasto. The other, dark all the way around, might indicate just cracked paint. So these are sort of the questions that we have to ask ourselves when we look at these paintings. As a result, the process is a little more thoughtful than what we did last assignment. Last assignment was just trying to basically make a drawing in paint. Now we're trying to think about what layer do I put on first, how much do I thin the paint, what layer do I put on second, do I add medium or straight paints, how thick do I need to go, what brush does it look like the artist used, all these questions to construct an actual painting. And this is one of the differences between drawing and painting that we talked about last year. You know, a drawing is shape, value, edge, and composition. To add the last two remaining elements to make it a painting, we have color and paint application. The brushwork, the film that's being produced by the artist. And this, I would say, is one of the things that is most neglected in students that I see trying to learn the craft of painting. Probably because drawing is so challenging, and when we're trying to do a painting, we're struggling with color, and we're also struggling with trying to get the drawing right. So, you know, you have those huge challenges hanging over your head. One of the last things you think about is paint application, because you're just trying to get something that looks similar to the image that's right next to you. And you know, that is a goal here, but the primary goal for this assignment is to focus on the application. And this is what's going to make your painting go from just sort of a boring copy to something that will ultimately become uniquely you. You know, a nice, pleasing painting that somebody likes to look at. Where are you making abstract marks? Where are you foiling thick against thin? Are you going to do an old master glaze type of painting? That'll certainly have a different feel than an alla prima loose painting. All of this comes down to laying the paint onto the canvas. So as a result, a lot of the more formal schools, traditional ateliers, will have students work in a year in black and white. Not because they need to understand values, because theoretically you understand values even before you get into painting. We spent a year on drawing, so if you are unable to produce a believable cast drawing with the appropriate relationship of light to dark, then you shouldn't even be moving into painting anyway. We're going into painting assuming we know all of that. And so the reason we would work for a year in black and white is to learn how to handle paint. We need to get you really comfortable with your brushes, really comfortable with how the canvas feels, how you're applying paint, what brand of paint you're using has a unique feel to it. We need to be consistent now, consistent with our brushes, consistent with our paint brand, consistent with our medium, consistent with the surface we're painting on, because all of these elements are coming together to make a different experience when we're painting. And so, you know, I have students who couldn't afford to buy whatever, and so they brought in a cheap canvas this time, or ran out of this type of paint, so they just went and bought this type of cheap paint over here. Well, if you keep mixing all of that stuff up, it's going to become a lot harder for you to establish that familiarity that we need to have to produce a painting. Working for a year in black and white, establishing that familiarity allows you to then deviate, in some instances, to experiment and see how different materials feel for your paint application. So maybe you end up wanting to switch to just a gessoed board and then see how the paint slides around. And that's good if you have a baseline of experience with paint application. But if you do one assignment on a heavy-duty canvas, one assignment on board, and then one assignment on maybe a textured panel, you know, too many different switching around is going to have a different experience, and it's unlikely as a student that you're going to remember and be able to recall and utilize each of those experiences to create a painting the next time. You know, we need that familiarity. We need the repetition here. And so I'll encourage you to pick a set of materials, pick a paint brand, have a set brand of brushes that you use, have a set substrate that you use, and work in a similar process the entire year. Now in this program, we don't have the luxury of a year in black and white. We have the luxury of a few assignments in black and white, and then we start moving to a limited color palette, and then we advance to full color palette. And you know, this is, again, a condensed, accelerated program. So the expectation is that you are working really, really hard on your own at home to get yourself up to the next level to be able to absorb the next information. So for example, our next assignment in this class is a limited palette master copy. So if you don't know how paint application works, then you are going to produce a painting that may superficially resemble the master copy in that it's kind of got the right color, but it doesn't look like it could be painted by the artist himself or herself. And as a result, you totally miss the idea of a master copy. You know, you could take a photo and copy the colors if you wanted to practice copying colors, but we're copying masterworks so you paint like the master. Your final assignment for this term is a master copy, and it has to be a colored master copy. But if you turn something in and your colors are kind of right, and your drawing looks good enough, and your values look good enough, but you painted a painting that thinly, when there was obvious use of impasto or thicker strokes in the master work, well then you didn't pass. It doesn't have to copy stroke for stroke what the master did, but we have to look at it and think that it's possible that, oh, perhaps maybe that artist did paint this. Maybe you did fool us. You know, we're trying to create almost like forgeries, in that one were to look at our painting and think that a master did it. Not that it's just a print or an approximation of the masterwork. So again, you don't have to copy stroke for stroke, but you have to copy the application process to make it look like that master did it. And that's our focus for this assignment. And this focus, you have the advantage because it's in black and white. So all you have to do is get the values right, and then tackle the paint application, and you should be in good shape. We have 3 sessions to work on this, and I'll do an hour demonstration each day in class, so that should come out to roughly 6 hours. So 6 hours isn't a lot of time. You're not going to get through an entire painting in class here. It's just not possible with our time constraints. So again, I'll encourage you strongly to be working on one at home. Give yourself as much time as needed, 30, 40, 50, 100 plus hours to get this right in black and white. You know, if you have 3 weeks at home to work on this and you're working for a few hours a day, then you can get a good 40, 50 hour painting in, at least in that amount of time. So try to shoot one out at home to take what we're doing in class and apply it further. The example that we shot last year was this Thayer painting. And so you can see in this demonstration, you know, I had 3 hours basically to execute this demonstration, give or take. And the idea was assessing the layers. Which of these colors in here is the toning of the canvas or the grisaille. There's an open grisaille painting underneath this painting. So it was a matter of assessing to what extent the open grisaille was developed, and then from there beginning to assess the paint strokes and how much medium looks like was used in the paint and which brush was used in the paint. And so you'll see I'm trying to mimic the same amount of underpainting showing through in certain areas, the same amount of medium in the brush stroke, and then seeking out the impasto marks on some of the areas and applying it in a similar manner. So, you know, it's working very slowly and deliberately. For a 3-hour painting, there's not a lot of information on here, right? And that's the whole idea. If you're doing this correctly, it should be a little bit more slow, laborious process because it's a lot of thinking involved. You know, you need to have that brushstroke chart out right next to you while you're working, and probably your value scales as well. And you should be holding your brushstroke chart near your master copy and looking at the stroke on the master copy, looking at the strokes on your brushstroke chart and trying to match, trying to figure out which brush with which medium with which stroke is the magic combination to do what the artist did. And then we match it. So it's very slow. It's see the stroke, match it on the chart, mix it, apply the stroke each and every time. If you're not using your brushstroke chart, it's unlikely that you're going to have enough skill with your paint handling to be able to execute this correctly. So keep it out at all time. Beyond that, there's not too much to consider here. So just keep working on the one at home until you have developed something that really looks like the master has done it. And don't deviate from that working method throughout the year. So really early on, I want you guys to begin to commit to a style of working so that we're not jumping all over the place. You had a whole composition lecture course in drawing where you were exposed to a lot of different artists working a lot of different styles, from academic to old master and glazing to loose and alla prima to even modern abstract art. And so at this point it's going to become really critical for you to pick one and run with it. I've had a lot of students try to go through this where they did an alla prima artist one assignment, and then they did a traditional academic artist another assignment, and then they did an old master glazed for another assignment. And you'll never develop a strong skill set if you keep bouncing around like that. And that's one of the flaws with some of the colleges and universities, is that they want everyone to be kind of a jack of all trades and dabble in a little of everything so you can see what you like. That's not how traditional training goes. You pick one method, you stick with it, and you get really, really good at it. And then once you're really comfortable and you have a baseline of knowledge, we can deviate from there. So you need to pick a set of artists who are all working in the same application and go from there. And as a guideline, it should be a factor of a couple things. First of all, what do you like to look at? If you don't like really tight realism, You shouldn't be looking to Bouguereau and Alma-Tadema and that core of people. Maybe if you like looser alla prima stuff, then the masters to consider are Sorolla, Sargent, Zorn, Velasquez, Franz Hall, those type of guys. But whatever style you like, there should be a group of artists that we can draw inspiration from and knowledge from. So stick to that. Then the second factor is going to be your temperament and your working method. If you're not the type of person who likes the energy and the challenge of alla prima, you like to slowly, steadily build up a drawing carefully and then transfer it and then slowly build up a painting, you shouldn't be working in a direct painting style. You should be working in indirect painting style with layering. Conversely, if you get really, really bored and you just cannot set your attention span longer than a few days on an assignment, well then you're probably going to be a direct painter or alla prima painter. And in that case, there's a trade-off because you're not spending 80 or 100 hours on a painting to build it up. You need to now do 8 or 10 paintings that are 10 hours each, or 5 hours each, or whatever. So you have to do 10 or 20 times more paintings that are shorter in length, and each time, hopefully, you're progressing your skill set further and further and further. But just because you're a direct alla prima painter doesn't mean you spend less time practicing or learning than if you're an academic or traditional painter. It just means that your actual paintings you spend less time on. You just do more of them. So it's your temperament mixed with what you like. And ultimately that'll come together to be something that's uniquely you. And they don't always match. You may really love the traditional realism, but you just don't have the patience for it. So then that's fine. Eventually you'll find a marriage there, but you need to find it quickly so that we can begin to advance in the program and you pick out a master copy that's suited to the direction that you intend to go in your education.